Now we have a distinct vision of what they were. And
Well, yeah.
back then it was before the war.
Well, that's a good question, because I keep asking myself. I keep seeing myself and what I was doing during those days when they were persecuting the Jews over there. Like in 38 and 39, you know, when they were really raising Cain, they were starting to put him in the, killing them en masse. And I know I was working at the clock tower at that time, and the thing is, what I remember about is how little attention we paid to all these events over there in Europe, and what a catastrophe it was. But we paid little attention to it. Of course, there's a reason for that too, and that is we thought it was a lot of propaganda. We didn't know what to believe and what not to believe. The thing is, it was so atrocious, some of the news, that we thought that no human being would do it, you know. And we didn't get many pictures for some reason or other. I don't know. News was kind of manipulated back in those days. And the thing too is when the Jews got their boat, they saved their money and got the boat to come to America, you know, spent all their money to get this boat and everything else, and they came to America and we turned them down. They couldn't land here. And so they went to Cuba, and they couldn't land there. And so all they could do was go back. Nobody else would have them. So they went back and ended up in the concentration camps. After they spent all their money and everything else on that boat, they'd gone to a lot of trouble. But, at the time, I don't remember reading about that. It's later in years I say, hey, did that really happen? You know, you can't believe it. Well, that is, in hindsight, we realize what was going on. At the time, we didn't. You know, we'd get a little news item or something in the paper, but then we say, well, it can't be, you know, so a lot of malarkey. Because war is noted for its propaganda. And so you don't know what to believe. But later on, after the war particularly, when the evidence was there, the photographs, everything of what went on, it's just unbelievable.
Right.
So we were a lot of innocent little bystanders over here. We had our own thing going. We wasn't paying too much attention. Our hearts were with the British and the Poles and everything. We, in our mind, the Germany was the enemy, even though we weren't fighting him. But Hitler was the enemy. But it was a surface type of feeling, you know. We didn't get it in our gut that he was the enemy, see. We didn't get it in our gut until December 7th of 41. Then we got in the gut when the Japs hit us in Pearl Harbor. Then, boy, I'll tell you, the next morning, all of us peace-loving people were ready to go. Boy, we were ready to kill them off. Really unbelievable. 24 hours made all the change in this whole country. We were ready to fight them. And there's a lot of argument, a lot of wonderment as to whether or not Roosevelt knew that was going to take place in Pearl Harbor and thought, hey, I'm going to let that happen so I can get these people aroused, because he would have had a hard time doing it under any other circumstances. There's evidence that he, and at least a lot of his military people, knew that this thing was coming, that they were heading, I don't know whether they're heading for, where they were heading for, like Pearl Harbor, but they knew they were going to attack somewhere. And because they sent their messages back and forth by letter instead of by telegraph and things like that. Instructions so that it was purposely delaying everything so nobody would be ready. And regardless of whether that's true or not, we were not ready. Nothing. They had a great big ball or somewhere on Saturday night. All of the bigwigs in the military and everything else having the time of their life, which was pretty common back there. That was the greatest job you could get with the military is Hawaii. And they've had it so easy so long, and then all of a sudden this thing blew up in our face. And the fact was, we were not ready. And if Roosevelt was thinking that it took something like that to do it, he was right. I mean, if as sorry a mess as Pearl Harbor was, and all the lives lost and everything over there, when you take into consideration all of the casualties and all of the damage and everything else that happened in that entire war, it was really a little thing that got us into it. Then you look at Pearl Harbor, and as big as it was at the moment, and then when you put it into the massive atrocities that had happened all over the world, it was a small incident.
Right.
But it was the incident that got us into it. So if you look at that picture on a broad scale like that, and a little cold-hearted because of all the people who were killed, the thing was probably worth it.
Now, you said that all in hindsight.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, no one knew anything about it.
No, we were.
Well, even that, the evidence about Roosevelt knowing about it, did you know that? Is that something you heard soon thereafter, or is this something you just found?
Well, I don't know how soon thereafter. I suppose there are certain people that thought right after the Roosevelt, well, people around him, I think, that knew of what he did and when he did it. You know, his help in the White House and everything. I would imagine, would really wonder, why didn't he move faster? Because he didn't, and not only him, but all of his underlings and everything else, and the people in the military in charge at Pearl Harbor. Nobody was excited. Of course, it was mostly Roosevelt that had to kick the thing off. I mean, they wouldn't get excited over there unless they knew it was going to happen. But I think they all suspicioned that sooner or later they're going to get knocked off somewhere. And so I think there were people close to him that agreed that, yeah, he knew it and let it happen. And of course, at that time, to say he did that, he would have been run out of office.
Right.
For having let all those people go. You had to look at the big picture in order to understand his motives. And now I think, I've never been a great fan of Roosevelt's, but I think he did a lot of things right. And he had to do it, just jump at the idea. There was no precedent to know whether what he was doing was right or wrong. But he'd do it. He'd take the gamble and do it. And a lot of things were good. And now when I look back at it, if that was the only way that he could get us excited, and I think it was, because, boy, we were isolationists, every one of us, on Saturday night, December 6th. But, boy, the next morning we were ready to go. And that did it. It couldn't have worked better for Roosevelt.
Was everyone isolationist because of World War I?
Yeah. We've all those years through the 20s and so forth after the First World War, we lost a lot of men over in Europe over there, and that war, like the Second World War too, as far as that goes, and many before and after, could have been stopped, could have been curtailed, or could have been shifted, you know. But they let the thing go, and it finally grew and grew. And it's we were dragged into the First World War, and we lost a tremendous amount of men over there. I think, as far as your losses in Europe are concerned, of the two wars, I think our losses were greater in the First World War than in the Second World War. Of course, in the Second World War, we were all over the world, fighting everywhere. So the total losses in the Second World War were greater. At least I think. I don't know, but I'd assume. I lost my train of thought. Which
Well,
is,
that's what I was asking. I mean, the World War One.
oh, I
made
see what you
people
were asking.
isolationists.
Yeah.
I mean, is that true?
After that, everybody says, no, sir, we're never going to get into Europe again. Never going to get into embroiled one of those things. It's costly, and men and manpower, materials, and everything else, and it's not our territory. And so as this thing grew over time, and Hitler came into being and everything else, and before him, when there was little breakups and wars here and there over in Europe, as there always are, we backed off. We didn't touch him. And even with Hitler, when he came, we didn't touch him. And we watched this thing grow and grow. And before Pearl Harbor, I think it was in 39 or 40, England gave Hitler an ultimatum that if he attacked Poland, that England was going to come into the war against him. Well, he did attack Poland. I don't remember the dates too well, but it was 39 or 40 something. So England came into the war. Well, it was kind of a braggadocio remark on England's part, because England wasn't prepared to go into something like that. They already knew that Hitler had tanks, machine, manpower, and everything else in numbers beyond what they had ever dreamed anybody would have. And he had them, and he marched them in front of TV cameras, or not TV cameras then, but I mean Pathé News and the rest of them. So the whole world knew the guy was what he had. And you don't do that unless you got some plans to do something with him. So everything was so blooming obvious, but everybody so afraid of getting into the war. This is the Europeans as well as us, that they backed off. And their remark about getting in the war if Poland was attacked, they thought that would stop him, but it didn't. Hitler couldn't be stopped, as they found out later. He couldn't be stopped anywhere. And so anyhow, England was into this thing and didn't have any materials or anything else, and we're still isolationists in those days. And so Churchill appealed to Roosevelt. Is there anything you can do for us? And Roosevelt was walking on glass, because if he did, he'd have everybody in America on his back. You know, we're not going over there and look what you're doing, you know. So, unbeknownst to most Americans, and this means most of the Americans, because it was a real QT deal, he started sending few things over there, ships, you know, and I don't know what else. Some of the records now are open to tell what he sent, but what he could get away with without the public knowing it, he funneled over there to him. What is that great book that tells this thing so well? There was why can't I think of the word? It's just one word. About this guy. And I can't remember his name. This is a great history lesson you're getting. But anyhow, he was a kind of in between. He was an American. And he was the one trusted man that Hitler, or not Hitler, but Churchill and Roosevelt relied on to funnel all this stuff through quietly. And he did. They almost had the name. And he did it. All this time while he's getting that stuff, whatever he can over there. And if it wasn't for that, Britain probably would have been creamed earlier than they were. because they were Brahmin London before even we got into it. We didn't get into it until until the end of 41. We declared war on Japan and Europe at the same time because they were allies, you know, Japan and Germany. And so that's when we got into it. But so what? We get into it, but we didn't have anything yet either. I mean, we'd been making stuff for Europe, but now here we're in the war. What are we going to fight with? Sticks? We had nothing. But boy, in one of the most amazing turnarounds in history, all our manufacturing forces and everything else all over the country got out of commercial and into military. And you know the records. We had airplanes, we had tanks, we had boats, we had everything. We made boats out of cement. And they were turning them out right and left, and they worked. And Kaiser, that was Kaiser's idea. And so anyhow, we were turning out things, and before long we became the great hope of the Allies, because without America they were dead ducks. Because at that time Hitler was still running all over everything. Hitler came in with, or Mussolini came in with Hitler. That brought that was the part of the Axis. The other axis was Japan. The three of them. And what besides those that came in voluntarily, all the rest of Europe, with the exception of Russia, was now under, well, and Sweden. A few of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Denmark, I think, were not. Norway, they got Norway, and the eastern fringe of Russia. That whole hunk of Europe, practically all of it, was under the Nazi control. And in fact, the thing that beat Hitler, besides the Allies and what we did, was going into Russia, because he had to fight both fronts then. And just like Napoleon found, when you go into Russia, you better think twice before you do, because you get miles and miles and miles and nothing. It draws you in and draws you in and gets you away from your supplies and away from your home port and everything else. Then all of a sudden you run into a billion manpower against you. And that's what happened over there. I mean, Russia didn't have nearly the equipment that Hitler had. But we sent a lot of stuff over to Russia to help them out. And but still, that was hardly enough. And if it wasn't for the fact that he had himself spread all over the continent over there, he might have won. Well, I don't think he would have won, but it would have lasted a heck of a lot longer. I think since we were into the war, even though we're distant from it, we had enough resources and could keep them going over there. And Hitler had a lot of supplies that he would run out of. He was hard up for oil. He was hard up for any kind of petroleum, gasoline, anything that ran his army. And where we had the whole world to get from. You know, not only did we have a lot, but I mean our ships all over the world, bringing in it from all over and giving it to our allies over there. Of course, the only ally we had left was Britain and Russia. And that's about all, because Sweden was neutral. The rest of them were neutral or small enough they weren't significant, you know, as an ally. Didn't do a lot, like Belgium and some of the others. Switzerland, of course, everybody keeps neutral because it's a place where everybody can meet and agree on something. So, anyhow, am I telling you anything?
Yeah.
Well, that's surprising. I just seem to rattle off here.
The question I had, though, was going back a little bit, before Hitler went into Poland, it sounds like I mean, Britain having said that they would, declare war if they went into Poland. Sounds like people maybe didn't believe or didn't want to believe that Hitler was really going to do it.
Well, before he went into Poland, he took over Czechoslovakia. And Britain at that time had a guy by the name of Chamberlain. Can't think of his first name. He was a prime minister. And so they decided that he would meet with Hitler somewhere in Europe, and they would set up a detent. They'd say, well, you stay out of Czechoslovakia and so forth. And well, there was others. Hungary and Austria is also involved in it. Stay out of that, and we'll stay out of this or something. Chamberlain, he comes back to Germany, the big smile on his face, say, no war in our time. But all this time, Hitler's getting ready to pounce on him. They did. Boom! He knocked off Czechoslovakia. He marches into Austria. He marches into Hungary, all into the Balkans, all over the place. After Chamberlain. So by that time, they began to know that, regardless of what they thought, he was serious. He was going to clean house, and he was doing a pretty good job of it. So they said, "Hey, we got to get off the pot and get going here." And so they did. And finally, like I say, Hitler overextended himself and lost thousands of men and all kinds of equipment, everything over there in Russia.